right, so today our lesson is involving the zero product property, which we learned last lesson, and all the factoring that we have done along the last week and a half. So this right here says to solve the equation x squared plus 5x equals -6. The very first step you always want to do is to set the quadratic equal to 0. Okay, so what I actually want you to do right now is go back to your flow chart. Remember I told you to leave a little space at the top. I hope you did that, because what we're going to do now is we're going to look at if we're solving as well. So we're going to make an arrow and then we'll say to solve, set one side equal to 0. Okay, so this is if you're solving. You would start at the top. If you're just factoring, then you'd still start here. Okay, and the difference between solving and factoring is solving is going to have an equal sign, where you're going to end up with an answer like x equals, whereas when we factored previous to this, there was no equal sign. Okay, so like I said, we're going to set the one side equal to 0. Then we just do our normal flat factoring. We look for a GCF, determine how many terms we have, and then there's difference of squares, SAM, or slide divide bottoms up. And then there's one additional step after that. So if we look at our example again, we made it equal to 0, so we added 6 to both sides. There's no like terms on this side, so we're left with x squared plus 5x plus 6, and that's now equal to 0. We then, again, we look through, there's no GCF. There were 3 terms, and there's a coefficient of x squared equal to 1. So we're doing the same factoring. So again, it would be 1 multiplies to 6 and adds to 5, which would be x plus 3, x plus 2. Now, we can now use the zero product property from the previous lesson, where, remember there's multiplication in between here, we can just set each factor equal to 0. So x plus 3 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0, and you solve, subtract 3, you get x equals -3, subtract 2, x equals -2. And you now have, you solved it, you got x equals for both answers. So we're going to do and add to our flow chart. So really the only 2 steps that are different is we have to make sure it's set equal to 0. That was a new step. And this, where you set each factor equal to 0. That was a new step. So we're going to go back to our flow chart, and then this is our last step. So once you factor it, no matter which way you ended up coming from, they're all going to lead to the last bubble, which is set each factor equals to 0 and solve. And again, that's your last step, and that's how you end up getting x equals. All right, let's look at a couple more examples. I have x squared minus 18 equals 0. All right, it has an equal to sign and it tells me to solve. So again, I set one side equal to 0. Well, that's done. So now I go look for a GCF. Well, I do have a GCF here. It happens to be 2. So I put the 2 in front, divide everything by 2. I get 2 times the quantity of x squared minus 9. I then look, x squared minus 9 is 2 terms. So the only thing I could do is difference of squares, factor it, or not factor it any further. in this case, I can do difference of squares. X squared is a perfect square, so is 9 and then begin subtracted. So I end up getting 2, the GCF of 2 still, x plus 3, x minus 3, and that is equal to 0. Again, last step, to follow our flow chart, we just did difference of squares. Now we set each factor equal to 0, and we solve. So now we actually have 3 factors, because there's multiplication right here, and multiplication right here. So what we do is we set 2 equal to 0, x plus 3 equal to 0 is your second factor, and x minus 3 equal to 0, that's your third factor. Can 2 ever equal 0 though, or does 2 equal 0? No. So notice it, we put a line through that saying it cannot work, so you're not going to get any answer from that. And then we'll subtract 3, x equals negative 3, add 3, x equals positive 3. All right, next one. Solve 2x squared equals negative 5x minus 2. Again, we have an equal sign, so we're going to solve. So first step is to set one side equal to 0. I always want to keep the x squared positive, because that way I don't have to pull out a GCF of a negative 1. So even though it would be probably easier to move just one term to the other side, this 2x squared is already positive. And it's ultimately going to save me a step if I don't have to pull out a GCF of negative 1. So I'm going to actually add 5x and add 2 in order to get it equal to 0. And again, none of those are going to be like terms, so you'll be left with 2x squared plus 5x plus 2. When we look for a GCF, there happens to not be one in this case. There's 3 terms, and there is a 2 in front of that x squared, which means we do slide divide bottoms up. And if we were to do that, we would get 2x plus 1, x plus 2. Again, if you want to see how, I slide that 2 over. I can SAM factor that now. 4 and 1. And then I divide everything by what I slid over, which was 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. That's how I got the x plus 2. This can't reduce, so I move that 2 in front, 2x plus 1. All right, so again, going back to our flow chart, we just did slide divide bottoms up. The last step is to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So 2x plus 1 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0. So here I would subtract 1 and then divide by 2, so x equals negative 1/2. And then here I would subtract 2. All right, let's do all right, that is how we are going to do these problems solving. This is how we solve quadratics with the zero product property. Make sure you follow that entire flow chart from top to bottom and that you added it all in here. This flow chart can really help your thought process, so please refer back to it often.